The night wore a mantle of deepest indigo, stitched with a million distant stars, each a tiny, glittering secret in the vast expanse above. Below, the ancient stone walls of Blackwood Manor absorbed the velvet darkness, exhaling the cool, damp breath of centuries. Inside, Alara moved through her chambers like a ghost of forgotten desires, the silken whisper of her gown, the only sound in the opulent quiet. She paused before the long arched window, gazing out at the meticulously kept gardens, now bathed in the silver-blue glow of a waning crescent moon. The air carried the heavy, intoxicating scent of night-blooming jasmine and damp earth, a fragrance that always stirred something primal and yearning deep within her. Blackwood had been her sanctuary, a place of quiet retreat after the clamor of the city, a balm for a heart that had grown weary of the superficial. But tonight, there was a different tremor in the air, a subtle vibration that promised more than mere solitude. Tonight, she was hosting a dinner. A small, intimate affair, ostensibly to reacquaint herself with a few local acquaintances, but in truth, a concession to the persistent hum of expectation that often accompanied her presence here. She wasn't entirely sure why she had agreed to it, or why a peculiar flutter had taken root in her chest as the hour approached. Perhaps it was the unsettling feeling that she was on the cusp of something, a subtle shift in the carefully constructed equilibrium of her life. Her fingers, adorned with a single emerald ring, traced the cool glass of the window pane. The reflection showed a woman poised on the brink of her mid-30s, her dark hair swept up in a loose, elegant chignon, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. Her eyes, a shade of deep moss green, held a flicker of something unreadable, a blend of introspection and a nascent, almost defiant anticipation. The gown she wore was a simple sheath of midnight blue silk, clinging to her curves with an understated elegance, its fabric a second skin against her own. It felt luxurious, a silent promise of the evening to come. With a soft sigh, Alara turned from the window, her gaze sweeping over the room. The flickering flames of the candelabra on her dressing table cast dancing shadows across the damask wallpaper, illuminating the rich textures of the antique furniture. A crystal decanter of water shimmered, catching the light. Everything spoke of quiet luxury, of a life lived with a certain measured grace. But beneath it all, a current hummed, a low, persistent thrum that she couldn't quite name. A discreet knock sounded at her door. "Madame Alara, the guests have begun to arrive," her housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, announced, her voice a soft murmur. "Thank you, Mrs. Finch. I'll be down shortly." Alara took one last, steadying breath, a faint smile touching her lips. It was time to descend, to re-enter the carefully choreographed dance of social graces. Yet, as she moved towards the grand staircase, a peculiar sense of heightened awareness settled over her. Each step on the worn, polished wood felt significant, each rustle of her silk gown a prelude. The drawing room, bathed in the soft glow of myriad candles, and the low fire in the hearth, already held the murmur of polite conversation. The air was warm, scented with cypress, and the faint, sweet note of old roses. A small group of familiar faces turned as she entered, their greetings warm and welcoming. She glided among them, offering smiles and pleasantries, her eyes, however, subtly scanning the room, as if searching for an elusive note in the symphony. Then, the doorbell chimed again, a little later than the others. A subtle shift in the room's energy, a collective turn of heads. Alara felt it before she saw him. A sudden, almost magnetic pull. He stood framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the dim light of the hall, before stepping fully into the room. Julian Thorne. The name alone carried a certain weight, a reputation that preceded him, whispered in hushed tones through the city's exclusive circles. A man of formidable intellect, known for his discerning taste, his enigmatic charm, and a certain ruthless elegance in business. He was not a frequent visitor to Blackwood's quiet corner of the world, and Alara had not truly expected him to accept her invitation. His presence now was an unbidden jolt to her composure. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps it was the way he carried himself, with an effortless grace that bordered on predatory. His evening suit, a deep charcoal gray, fitted him impeccably, emphasizing the lean strength of his frame. Dark hair, slightly unruly, framed a face that was all sharp angles and intriguing shadows. But it was his eyes that truly held her captive across the room. A startling, intense blue, capable of both piercing scrutiny and a languid, almost insolent warmth. Their gazes locked. Across the expanse of polished floor and hushed conversation, a silent current surged between them. It wasn't merely recognition. It was something far older, far more potent. A spark, immediate and undeniable, that seemed to bypass all superficial pleasantries and strike directly at the core of her being. A slow smile, both knowing and utterly disarming, curved his lips. It wasn't a broad social smile, but a subtle, intimate gesture that made her feel as though they were sharing a secret no one else in the room could possibly comprehend. He moved into the room, a glass of amber liquid already in his hand, his progress unhurried, his attention seemingly divided among the other guests, yet his eyes kept returning to her, a magnetic thread drawing her focus. He greeted the others with a smooth, resonant voice that seemed to vibrate through the very air, a sound like aged oak and fine whiskey. Each word was carefully chosen, each gesture perfectly calibrated. When he finally reached her, the proximity sent a shiver through her, a delicious tremor that she quickly suppressed. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice closer now, a low caress against her ear. "It's been too long." "Julian," she replied, her voice steady, though she felt a faint flush rising to her cheeks. "I confess, I wasn't certain you would grace us with your presence." His smile deepened, a flash of something unreadable in his eyes. "And miss the opportunity to see Blackwood in its full autumnal splendor, and its captivating mistress? Unthinkable." His gaze lingered on her, drifting from her eyes to the curve of her neck, down the line of her silk gown, and back up again. A silent, thorough appraisal that left her breathless and strangely exposed. It was not overtly sexual, yet it was undeniably sensual, a connoisseur appreciating a rare and exquisite work of art. "You flatter me," she managed, a faint tremor in her voice. "Only with the truth," he countered, his eyes holding hers. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken understanding. It was as if the other guests, their polite chatter, the very room itself, had faded into a soft blur, leaving only the two of them, in a bubble of potent silence. Mrs. Finch, ever discreet, appeared beside them. "Dinner is served, Madame Ilara." The announcement broke the spell, a gentle mercy. Ilara nodded, offering Julian a small, composed smile. "Shall we?" He extended his arm, a gesture of old-world chivalry. His touch, as her hand rested lightly on his forearm, was electric, a jolt that went straight to her core. Through the fine wool of his suit jacket, she felt the warmth of his skin, the taut strength of his muscle. He smelled faintly of sandalwood, and something uniquely his own, a clean masculine scent that was both intoxicating and comforting. They walked side by side into the dining room, a silent pact sealing the charged moment they had just shared. The table was exquisitely laid, crystal glittering, silver gleaming under the candlelight. Ilara had carefully planned the seating arrangements, placing Julian across from her, a strategic decision born of an instinct she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. She wanted to see him, to observe him, to feel the pull of his presence across the elegant expanse of linen and flowers. Throughout the dinner, the conversation flowed easily, discussions ranging from politics to art, from local gossip to global affairs. Julian was, as expected, a brilliant conversationalist, his insights sharp, his wit dry and engaging. He held the attention of the table effortlessly, yet Ilara felt his eyes return to her again and again, a silent dialogue unfolding beneath the polite surface of their exchanges. Each time their gazes met, a jolt of recognition passed between them, a whisper of connection that transcended words. She found herself watching the way his hands moved as he gestured, the subtle play of expression on his face, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw when a point was made. She noticed the way the candlelight caught the silver threads in his dark hair, the sensual curve of his mouth when he smiled. At one point, as he was describing a recent archaeological discovery, his eyes, alight with passion, found hers. There's a certain thrill, isn't there? He mused, in uncovering something ancient, something that has lain hidden for centuries, waiting to be revealed. His voice was low, resonant, and though his words were addressed to the table, his gaze was exclusively for her, a question, an invitation hanging unspoken in the air. Ilara felt a flush spread across her décolletage. Indeed, she replied, her voice a little breathy. The allure of the unknown, the thrill of discovery. It's profound. His smile was slow, deliberate. Profound, he echoed, the single word laden with a weight that had nothing to do with ancient artifacts. It was a shared secret, a mutual understanding of a deeper resonance. As the courses were cleared and the dessert wine poured, the atmosphere in the room grew warmer, more relaxed. The other guests, comfortable in their shared camaraderie, seemed to recede, their voices becoming a gentle hum in the background. Ilara found herself increasingly drawn into Julian's orbit, her senses acutely aware of his every move, his every glance. When the dinner concluded, the guests retired to the drawing room for coffee and digestives. Ilara, feeling a curious lightness in her step, began to circulate, ensuring everyone was comfortable. She found herself drawn to a quiet corner where Julian stood, contemplating a large oil painting of the manor in winter. It's a rather stark depiction, wouldn't you say? She offered, joining him. Almost melancholic. He turned, his proximity immediately raising the temperature in the air around her. Perhaps, he conceded, his voice a low rumble. But there's beauty in the starkness. A certain brutal honesty. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. His eyes, however, were not on the painting, but on her, searching her face with an intensity that made her heart quicken. And do you find honesty appealing, Julian? She asked, a challenge implicit in her tone. Above all else, Ilara, he replied, his gaze unwavering. Especially in matters of the heart where artifice often reigns supreme. The conversation felt suddenly intimate, venturing into territory that felt both dangerous and exhilarating. She felt a magnetic pull, an invisible thread tightening between them. And you believe honesty is always possible? He took a step closer, his hand reaching out, not quite touching her, but hovering inches from her arm. Perhaps not always, but it is always worth striving for. The truth, unvarnished, has a power all its own. His fingers flexed, a silent invitation to bridge the small gap between them. The air thrummed with unspoken desires. The scent of sandalwood and something wilder, deeper, emanated from him, filling her senses. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle tension in his frame. Her own skin felt alive, tingling with anticipation. What truth, then, are you striving for tonight, Julian? She whispered, her voice barely audible. His eyes deepened, mirroring the flickering candlelight. Many, Ilara. But the most pressing perhaps is the truth of this moment, the undeniable current that flows between us. He finally, slowly, reached out, his fingertips brushing lightly against the bare skin of her forearm. It was a fleeting touch, yet it sent a jolt of pure sensation through her, a wave of heat that spread like wildfire. Her breath caught in her throat. His touch lingered, a feather-light pressure that promised so much more. She felt a delicious shiver run down her spine, a silent acknowledgement of the desire that had been simmering between them all evening. His thumb moved, a soft, teasing caress against her skin. Velvet Whis, he murmured, his voice a low, husky whisper that seemed to bypass her ears and settle directly in the core of her being. That's what this feels like. A whisper against velvet. Soft, luxurious, deeply felt. Her gaze lifted to his, wide and luminous. His face was close, his eyes burning with an unspoken intensity that both thrilled and intimidated her. The world outside their small, charged space seemed to fade entirely, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a potent moment of undeniable attraction. He leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek, smelling faintly of the red wine he had consumed. There's a silence in you, Ilara, he continued, his voice barely audible, that speaks volumes, a depth I find endlessly captivating. Her lips parted slightly, a silent invitation. She felt an almost unbearable yearning, a deep, aching need to bridge the remaining distance between them. The polite veneer of the evening had shattered, replaced by a raw, electric tension. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there, a silent promise. The faint sounds of conversation from the other side of the room seemed impossibly distant. Her entire world had narrowed to the space between their bodies, the warmth of his hand on her arm, the intense blue of his eyes. She wanted to lean into him, to feel the solid strength of his chest against hers, to taste the promise on his lips. He moved imperceptibly closer, his head tilting, his eyes never leaving hers. The air crackled with a silent plea, a shared magnetic desire that pulsed between them. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, profound quiet. She felt herself drawn irresistibly into his orbit, a moth to a flame, knowing full well the exquisite heat that awaited her. His fingers tightened ever so slightly on her arm, a silent anchor in the swirling tempest of her senses. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering, on the brink of an exquisite release. His fingers tightened, ever so slightly on her arm, a silent anchor in the swirling tempest of her senses. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering, on the brink of an exquisite release. His gaze, dark and fathomless, dipped from her eyes to her lips, then back again. A silent question. A powerful affirmation. Her own breath caught, a fragile thing in her throat. She felt the magnetic pull intensify, a force that hummed deep in her bones, urging her forward into the exquisite unknown. A tremor ran through her, a delicious shiver that had nothing to do with cold. She knew, with an absolute certainty that stole her breath, what was about to happen, and every fiber of her being yearned for it. He leaned in, slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to pull away, to break the spell. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. Her eyes fluttered closed as his shadow fell over her. The subtle scent of him. Clean linen, a hint of something earthy and masculine, and the faint, intoxicating aroma of the wine they'd shared, filling her lungs, intoxicating her further. The air crackled, thick with unspoken longing. Then, his lips brushed hers. It was a feather-light touch, tentative, a mere whisper of contact that sent a jolt through her entire body. A gasp escaped her, a fragile sound lost between them. Her own lips parted slightly, an invitation she hadn't consciously offered, but that he instinctively accepted. He deepened the kiss, a gentle pressure at first, exploring the soft curve of her mouth, tasting the sweetness there. It was a kiss that promised, a kiss that questioned, a kiss that held a universe of yearning. Her fingers, which had been frozen at her sides, now instinctively rose, finding purchase on his strong shoulders. The fabric of his shirt was warm beneath her fingertips, the muscle beneath taut. She felt herself leaning into him, drawn by an invisible thread, her body responding with an urgency that both thrilled and unnerved her. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against her lips, and the kiss deepened further still. It was no longer tentative, but hungry, passionate, a desperate plea and an eager response. His mouth moved over hers with an exquisite expertise, teasing, tasting, demanding. Her head tilted back, allowing him freer access, her senses reeling. She tasted wine and him, an intoxicating blend that made her dizzy. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of sensation. His free hand, which had been anchoring her arm, now slid up, tracing the delicate line of her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with a tenderness that belied the fierce passion of his kiss. She felt herself melting into him, her body softening, yielding. The world outside them receded, fading into a blur of insignificance. There was only the heat of his mouth on hers, the exquisite pressure, the soft rasp of stubble against her skin, the dizzying rush of pure, unadulterated desire. When he finally broke the kiss, it was with a reluctant sigh, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling, ragged and fast. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his, which were dark, dilated, and alight with a raw primal fire. A faint blush crept up her neck, but she didn't look away. There was no shame, only an overwhelming sense of rightness, of destiny unfolding. "Cassandra," he whispered, his voice husky, a low rumble that vibrated through her. Her name on his lips was a caress, a promise. "You have no idea." He didn't finish the thought, but she felt its weight, its intensity. She couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion, her body thrumming with the aftershocks of the kiss. She simply gazed at him, her eyes mirroring the desire she saw in his. He lifted a hand, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her lower lip, still swollen, tingling from their kiss. The touch was feather light, yet it reignited the spark, sending another wave of heat through her. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice barely audible, yet ringing with command. It wasn't a question, but an invitation, a silent plea that she felt deep in her soul. He didn't wait for an answer, but his gaze held hers, seeking her consent, her willingness. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and led her away from the flickering firelight of the living room. Down a short hallway she hadn't noticed before. The house was quiet around them, the world outside a distant hum. Each step was deliberate, a slow, sensual progression towards something inevitable. The warmth of his hand in hers was a steadying presence, yet it also sent shivers of anticipation through her. The hallway opened into a spacious bedroom, bathed in the soft, ambient glow of moonlight, streaming through a large window. A single low-wattage lamp on a bedside table cast a warm, golden pool of light, chasing away the deeper shadows, but leaving plenty of mystery. The air in the room was infused with a faint, clean scent, perhaps lavender, or fresh linen, a soothing contrast to the fiery intensity that coursed through her veins. Her eyes swept over the room, a grand four-poster bed draped with sheer, flowing fabric, a plush rug beneath their feet, heavy velvet curtains drawn back to reveal the shimmering night sky. It was a sanctuary, a place of quiet luxury and profound intimacy. He released her hand, only to cup her face in both of his thumbs caressing her cheekbones once more. His eyes searched hers, a silent communication passing between them. "Are you sure, Cassandra?" he asked, his voice a low, tender murmur. His concern, even amidst the escalating passion, touched her deeply. She reached up, her own hands finding his, her fingers tracing the strong lines of his wrist. She leaned into his touch, her gaze unwavering. "Yes," she breathed, the word a soft exhalation of certainty. "More than sure." A small, knowing smile played on his lips, a flicker of pure male satisfaction that sent a thrill through her. He lowered his head again, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her eyelids, before finally finding her lips once more. This kiss was slower, deeper than the last, an unhurried exploration, a promise of what was to come. It was a kiss meant to savor, to linger, to tell her without words how much he desired her. His hands slid from her face, down her neck, over her shoulders, tracing the delicate curve of her collarbone. The silk of her dress rustled beneath his touch, a soft whisper in the quiet room. She felt the subtle shift in the air as he took a step back, breaking the kiss, but his eyes never left hers. He reached for the delicate strap of her dress, his fingers brushing against her skin, sending a fresh wave of goosebumps across her arms. She held her breath, watching his every move, mesmerized by the intensity in his eyes. With a slow, deliberate motion, he unfastened the small clasp, and the silk fabric, like a living thing, began to slide down her shoulders. It was an unveiling, a gentle revelation. The cool air brushed against her bared skin, a stark contrast to the heat that was building within her. The dress pooled at her feet, a shimmering cascade of fabric, leaving her standing before him, in nothing but her delicate lace chemise and matching briefs. A blush crept up her neck and cheeks, but his gaze was one of pure admiration, devoid of judgment, filled only with a profound appreciation for her form. He reached out, his fingertips just barely brushing the lace that covered her breast. A touch so light it was almost imperceptible, yet it sent a searing heat through her. Her nipples hardened instantly, straining against the delicate fabric. Her breath hitched. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. His eyes devoured her, lingering on the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips, the long line of her legs. She felt exquisitely vulnerable, yet utterly desired. Then her gaze fell to him, and she realized he hadn't moved to shed his own clothes. A silent question hung in the air. He seemed to read her thoughts, a faint smile touching his lips. "My turn," he murmured, his eyes twinkling with a playful sensuality. She nodded, a small smile gracing her own lips. "Please." He reached for the buttons of his shirt, his movements unhurried, deliberate. Each button, slowly unfastened, revealed another plane of his chest. She watched, captivated, as the crisp fabric parted, revealing the smooth, bronzed skin beneath, the subtle ripple of muscle, the dark hair that feathered across his pectorals. Her eyes traced the lines of his body, the strong shoulders, the defined arms, the powerful chest that she longed to feel pressed against her own. He shrugged the shirt from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor with a soft thud. He stood before her, his upper body bare, a magnificent sculpture of strength and grace. Her gaze dropped lower, lingering on the waistband of his trousers, the hint of defined abs beneath the fabric. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an undeniable electricity. He met her gaze, his eyes burning with an intense, unyielding desire. He took a step closer, then another, until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the intoxicating scent of his skin. He reached for her again, his hands finding her waist, pulling her gently against him. The lace of her chemise was a thin barrier between their bodies, a tantalizing whisper of what was to come. She could feel the hard planes of his chest against her breasts, the warmth of his skin seeping through the delicate fabric. Her hands, emboldened by his touch, rose to his chest, her fingers tangling in the soft hair, exploring the smooth, warm skin. She felt the powerful beat of his heart beneath her palm, a frantic rhythm that mirrored her own. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, inhaling his scent, letting herself be enveloped by his warmth, his strength. He lowered his head, his lips finding the sensitive skin of her neck, just beneath her ear. A shiver coursed through her as his warm breath fanned her skin, as his mouth moved with exquisite tenderness, tasting, nibbling, sending delicious tremors through her. "Cassandra," he whispered again, his voice a low groan, his lips pressing a soft kiss to her pulse point. "You have no idea what you do to me." Her fingers tightened on his chest, her nails lightly raking his skin, a soft moan escaping her lips. She arched into him, her body instinctively seeking more contact, more closeness. His hands slid lower, tracing the curve of her spine, pressing her hips more firmly against his, allowing her to feel the hard ridge of his desire through the fabric of his trousers. The reality of their situation, the undeniable pull between them, hit her with a force that stole her breath. This was real. This was happening. And she wanted it with an intensity that bordered on desperation. He lifted his head, his eyes burning into hers, a silent question passing between them. Then with a gentle push, he guided her backward, towards the magnificent bed. Her legs felt a little unsteady, but she trusted him implicitly, letting him lead her. The soft mattress yielded beneath her as she sat on the edge, her eyes never leaving his. He knelt before her, his gaze unwavering, and reached for the hem of her briefs. With a practiced ease, he peeled them down her legs, the lace sliding over her skin like a second caress. He then did the same with her chemise, his eyes lingering on her breasts as the fabric fell away. She was completely bare before him now, vulnerable and exposed, yet she felt no shame, only a profound sense of anticipation. He ran his hands slowly up her leg, from her ankle to her inner thigh, his touch igniting a trail of fire in its wake. She gasped, a soft, involuntary sound. His fingers curled around her knee, then slowly, Deliberately he separated her legs, his gaze still locked with hers, asking for permission, offering devotion. She opened for him, a silent invitation, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and fervent desire. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her inner thigh, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her. He tasted her skin, then moved higher, his breath warm and intoxicating against her most sensitive flesh. Her fingers gripped the soft sheets beneath her. Her head falling back, a soft moan escaping her lips. He rose, his eyes dark with unbridled desire, and quickly shed his remaining clothes. His trousers and boxers joined her discarded garments on the floor. He stood before her, magnificent and unashamed, his body a testament to masculine power and raw beauty. Her gaze swept over him, taking in the sculpted lines of his torso, the powerful thighs, the undeniable evidence of his desire for her. He climbed onto the bed, settling himself beside her, the mattress sinking beneath their combined weight. He reached for her, pulling her close, until their naked bodies were pressed together, skin to skin, heat to heat. Her arm instinctively wrapped around his waist, her hands splaying across the small of his back, feeling the warmth and strength of him. The sensation of his bare skin against hers was exhilarating, overwhelming. The soft hairs on his chest tickled her breasts, sending delicious shivers through her. She felt the hard planes of his stomach, the solid muscle of his thighs pressed against hers. It was a perfect fit, a natural alignment that felt utterly destined. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply, his breath warm against her scalp. "You feel incredible, Cassandra," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. So soft, so warm. She tightened her embrace, pressing herself closer, wanting to absorb every inch of him. Her lips found the warm skin of his shoulder, pressing soft kisses there, tasting the salt and musk of his skin. She felt utterly consumed, lost in the intoxicating world of his touch, his scent, his presence. His hand stroked her back, slowly, deliberately from her shoulders to the small of her back, then up again, a mesmerizing rhythm that lulled her into a deeper state of surrender. He shifted slightly, propping himself up on one elbow, his eyes gazing down at her, alight with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers in a series of soft, lingering kisses, each one a promise, a question, a deepening affirmation of their connection. His fingers threaded into her hair, gently cupping the back of her head, holding her captive in his intoxicating gaze. "I've wanted you," he whispered, his voice raw. "For so long. Since the moment I saw you." Her breath hitched. The admission, spoken with such raw honesty, sent a tremor through her. I felt it too," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes locked with his. That pull, that certainty. A slow, tender smile touched his lips, a look of profound understanding. He kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that stole her breath and shattered her remaining inhibitions. His tongue danced with hers, exploring, tasting, demanding. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, wanting to dissolve into him. His hand left her hair, trailing down her neck, over her collarbone, then slowly, tantalizingly, cupping her breast. A gasp escaped her as his thumb brushed over her nipple, sending a bolt of pure, unadulterated pleasure straight to her core. Her body arched into his touch, a silent plea for more. He lowered his head, his lips replacing his hand, suckling gently, teasingly, at the taut peak of her breast. A soft moan escaped her, a sound she barely recognized as her own. His mouth was warm, wet, and utterly delicious. He suckled, he nipped, he teased, driving her to the brink of exquisite sensation. She tangled her fingers in his hair, holding him closer, her hips beginning a slow, restless grind against his. Her body was aflame, every nerve ending alive and buzzing. She felt the relentless ache deep inside her, a yearning that was growing more insistent with every touch. every kiss. He moved from one breast to the other, lavishing attention on each, driving her further into a haze of pure, unthinking sensation. When he finally lifted his head, her eyes were glazed with desire, her lips swollen from his kisses, her chest heaving. He gazed at her, his eyes dark with passion, a profound tenderness etched on his face. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, small, reverent kisses that spoke volumes. He shifted his weight, moving over her, his body a heavy, comforting presence. She felt the hard length of him pressing against her, a fiery brand against her femininity. Her legs instinctively parted, wrapping around his hips, drawing him closer still. The friction, the exquisite pressure, was almost unbearable. He rested his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, ragged and fast. Her hips began to rock, a primal rhythm, urging him closer, deeper. He groaned, a low, guttural sound of pure male desire. "Are you ready for me, Cassandra?" he whispered, his voice thick with a passion that mirrored her own. His eyes dark and intense searched hers, seeking her final, explicit consent. She looked at him, into the depths of his soul, and saw nothing but adoration, desire, and a profound connection that transcended the physical. Her heart swelled with a feeling so powerful, it almost brought tears to her eyes. "Yes," she breathed, her voice trembling with emotion, with longing, with the weight of this extraordinary moment. "Yes, I'm ready." He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that promised untold pleasure. He leaned down, capturing her mouth in a searing kiss, and at the same moment he began to move, slowly, deliberately, bringing their bodies into a perfect, breathtaking alignment. The world narrowed to the two of them, to the intoxicating rhythm of their bodies, to the exquisite anticipation of becoming one. A soft gasp escaped her lips as his body, solid and warm, pressed fully against hers. The first delicate push, a tentative exploration, a slow, deliberate glide that bridged the final, exquisite distance. A shudder ran through her, a tremor that resonated deep within her core, not of fear, but of profound recognition, of rightness. He paused, his eyes dark pools of liquid desire, searching hers for affirmation, for any sign of discomfort. But there was only pure, unadulterated yearning reflected back, a silent plea for him to continue. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, his breath warm against her cheek as he slowly, completely entered her world. Her head fell back against the pillows, a soft moan escaping her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own. It was a sound of surrender, of acceptance, of a pleasure so potent it stole her breath. He filled her completely, perfectly, a sensation so utterly profound it felt as though she had been waiting for this exact moment her entire life. A deep, anchoring connection, a powerful grounding force that settled a long-held restlessness within her soul. He moved with a tender precision, a careful dance of give and take, allowing her body to adjust, to open, to fully embrace him. Her hips instinctively rose to meet his, a primal invitation, a wordless plea for more. The rhythm began to build, slow and deliberate, a crescendo of sensation that started as a gentle hum and gradually deepened into a resonant thrum. Each movement was an exploration, a discovery, a deepening of the bond that already held them captive. His lips found the sensitive curve of her neck, trailing hot kisses along her jawline, down to the hollow of her throat, eliciting shivers that danced across her skin. His hand, strong and possessive, cradled the back of her head, tangling in her hair, holding her close as their bodies found their cadence. Her fingers dug into the taut muscles of his shoulders, clinging to him as if to anchor herself in the rising tide of sensation. The world outside the four walls of this room ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of his skin against hers, the scent of him, a warm, masculine aroma of cedar and clean linen, filling her senses, intoxicating her. There was only the soft rasp of their breaths, growing ragged and quick, mingling in the moonlit air. Moonlight, diffused through the sheer curtains, cast their entwined forms in silver, painting shadows that danced with their movements, a silent, ancient ritual playing out in the hush of the night. He watched her, his eyes never leaving hers, even as the intensity mounted. He saw the flush that bloomed across her chest, the slight tremble of her lower lip, the way her eyelids fluttered, heavy with pleasure. He saw the transformation in her eyes, from hesitant anticipation to burning desire, to a wide-eyed wonder that mirrored his own. This wasn't just physical. It was an alchemy of souls, a merging of two separate histories into a shared present, a promise whispered in the language of touch. "Look at me," he commanded softly, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her, and she obeyed, her gaze locking with his. In their depths, she saw not just passion, but reverence, a deep, abiding respect that brought tears to her eyes. He was offering her not just his body, but his heart, his vulnerability, his very essence. With each thrust, he seemed to draw something new from her. A deeper moan, a more fervent arch of her back, a tighter clench of her muscles around him. He leaned down, capturing her mouth in another searing kiss, deep and hungry, a taste of all the passion yet to come. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer still, desperate to feel every inch of him, to absorb him into her very being. Their tongues danced, a mirror of their bodies below, intertwining, tasting, exploring. He began to vary the rhythm, sometimes slow and deep, drawing out the exquisite friction, sometimes quickening, teasing the edges of her control. She felt the coils of pleasure tightening within her, winding tighter and tighter with each delicious movement. A heat spread through her veins, a liquid fire that consumed her from the inside out, making her skin prickle, her senses heighten. Every nerve ending seemed alive, humming with an electric current. "You feel incredible," he breathed against her lips, pulling back just enough to look at her, his forehead resting against hers. "So perfect, so utterly mignon." The possessiveness in his tone wasn't threatening, but deeply thrilling. A confirmation of the bond they were forging, a claim she welcomed with every fiber of her being. She could only whimper in response, her voice lost to the rising storm within her. Her fingers threaded through his hair, tugging gently, urging him on, her hips bucking instinctively in a primal dance. The world narrowed further, becoming a tunnel of pure sensation, a spiraling ascent towards an unknown, magnificent peak. His scent, his taste, the feel of his skin, the intoxicating pressure within her, it was all consuming. He felt her nearing the precipice, felt the delicate tremors begin to ripple through her, and he pushed deeper, a sustained, powerful rhythm that carried her over the edge. Her back arched, her legs tightening around his waist, and a cry, primal and guttural, tore from her throat as the first wave of release crashed over her. It was a shattering, blissful explosion, a kaleidoscope of sensation that dissolved all thought, all identity, save for the incredible blinding light of his presence. Her body convulsed around him, milking every last drop of pleasure from his deep, insistent movements. He held her, absorbing her climax, his own body tensing, his jaw clenched, riding the edge of his own release. He watched her face, utterly lost in her pleasure, and felt an overwhelming rush of love and triumph. He continued to move, a few more powerful thrusts, until his own body could take no more. With a deep groan he surrendered, burying his face in the curve of her neck, his own release shattering through him, hot and potent, joining with hers in a profound shared culmination. For a long moment they lay entwined, their breaths ragged, their bodies slick with exertion and passion. The air in the room hummed with the aftershocks of their union, a palpable energy that lingered, warm and heavy. Her heart hammered against her ribs, slowly settling into a calmer rhythm, but the feeling of utter contentment, of profound peace, remained. He shifted, just enough to pull the duvet higher, tucking it around them both, his arms still wrapped tightly around her waist, holding her pressed against him. He kissed her temple gently, a soft, lingering touch that was more tender than passionate, a kiss of quiet affection and deep gratitude. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice still hoarse, a hint of concern in his tone. She nodded, unable to form words, just pressing her face into his shoulder, inhaling his scent, feeling the reassuring thud of his heart against her ear. She felt utterly safe, cherished, and more deeply connected to another human being than she had ever thought possible. This was more than pleasure. It was a homecoming. After a few moments of quiet recovery, she managed a weak, contented sigh. "More than all right," she murmured, her voice husky. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze, her eyes still sparkling with the remnants of pleasure, but now also shining with a deep, emotional warmth. "That was extraordinary." He smiled, a soft, tender curve of his lips, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "You are extraordinary," he corrected softly, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Every part of you." He kissed her then, a slow, deep kiss that was full of the tenderness of the aftermath, a lingering taste of their shared passion. It was a kiss that promised forever, a silent vow whispered between souls. She felt herself melting into him, her body still humming, her mind pleasantly hazy. They lay for a long time, simply holding each other, the moon tracing its arc across the sky, casting ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow across the room. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, the warmth of his skin against hers, the comforting weight of his arm around her. It was a perfect moment of quiet intimacy, a stark contrast to the exhilarating storm that had just passed, yet equally profound. But even as the last tremors faded, a new current began to stir beneath the surface, a deeper hum that promised another journey. The memory of his touch, the taste of his skin, the way their bodies had fit together so perfectly. It was too potent to simply fade into sleep. Her body, still exquisitely sensitive, began to hum with a gentle reawakening. A soft warmth spread through her limbs, a lazy stretch of desire that coiled in her belly. She felt him stir too, a subtle shift in his weight, a deepening of his breath against her hair. His hand, which had been resting gently on her hip, began to move, tracing light, teasing circles on her skin, sending shivers anew through her. Her breath hitched. "Still with me?" he whispered, his voice a low rumble against her ear, a playful undertone now present. She shifted, turning slightly to face him more fully, her leg intertwining with his. "Always," she breathed, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight rasp of stubble beneath her fingertips. Her eyes, now fully open, met his in the dim light, sparkling with renewed invitation. He chuckled softly, a warm, rich sound that vibrated through her. "Good." His hand moved lower, slipping beneath the duvet, finding the sensitive skin of her inner thigh, his touch light, exploratory, but immensely potent. A jolt went through her, sharp and sweet. "I don't think I've ever felt this alive," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, a newfound vulnerability in her tone. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a soft, tender kiss that quickly deepened, a slow, sensual exploration that ignited the embers of their previous passion. His hand continued its mesmerizing journey, moving higher, his fingers brushing against the soft curls at the apex of her thighs, sending a fresh wave of heat through her. She arched into his touch, a soft moan escaping her throat. "You feel like a dream," he murmured against her mouth, breaking the kiss only to trail his lips down her jaw, to the pulse point at her throat, where her heart now hammered a frantic rhythm. "A beautiful, intoxicating dream I never want to wake from." His body began to press into hers again, gently at first, then with a growing urgency. The familiar weight, the solid warmth, the intoxicating scent, it was all beckoning her back into the swirling vortex of desire. Her hands found their way to his shoulders, then threaded through his hair, pulling him closer, desperate for the exquisite friction, the deep connection. The rhythm began to build once more, slower this time, more languid, a sensual dance of rediscovery. He moved with a deliberate care, savoring each movement, watching her face, listening to her soft moans, drawing out the pleasure, stretching the boundaries of their shared desire. She felt herself opening to him again, a willing vessel for his passion, her body remembering the exquisite sensations, craving their return. His breath was ragged against her ear, his whispers a soft cadence of adoration and longing. "My love," he murmured, "you are pure magic." Each word was a caress, a balm to her soul, an affirmation of the profound connection they were weaving. They moved together, a symphony of touch and sensation, their bodies perfectly attuned, anticipating each other's needs. The moon, now higher in the sky, cast a pale glow through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a silent witness to their escalating passion. The world outside was hushed, lost in the depths of night, leaving them utterly alone in their cocoon of intimacy. Her breath hitched as he deepened his thrust, finding a new angle, a new intensity that sent shivers of pure delight through her. She gasped, her fingers digging into his back, her hips rising to meet his with an urgent desperation. The pleasure was building again, a slow, relentless tide, washing over her, pulling her deeper into its intoxicating current. This time, it felt different, softer perhaps, yet even more profound, laced with a deeper tenderness that had bloomed in the aftermath of their first union. It was a love-making born of knowing, of shared vulnerability, of souls laid bare. He leaned down, his eyes locking with hers, a silent question, a silent promise. She responded with a soft, trembling smile, her eyes conveying all the unspoken desires of her heart. Yes. More. Always more. Ian. With a soft groan, he surrendered to the rising tide, his movements growing more powerful, more urgent. Her body arched, her cries growing louder, more fervent, as the second wave of pleasure began its inexorable climb. She felt herself teetering on the edge again, a delicious precipice, the world blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors behind her closed eyelids. Her climax was building, a slow burn that threatened to consume her entirely, a testament to the boundless passion he ignited within her. And as he continued to move, deep and strong, she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was utterly, irrevocably his. And he, entirely, wonderfully, hers. The night stretched before them, a canvas for their unfolding love story. He continued to move, deep and strong, and the world spun faster, colors exploding behind her eyelids as the slow burn ignited into an inferno. A gasp tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated release as her body convulsed around him, 1,000 shimmering nerve endings singing in unison. It was an exquisite surrender, a free fall into bliss, and she clung to him, nails digging lightly into the taut muscles of his back, as wave after wave of pleasure washed over her, each more potent than the last. He met her there, a guttural groan rumbling from his chest as he plunged one last powerful time, holding her tight as his own release cascaded through him. His body tensed, then relaxed, his breath ragged against her ear, mirroring her own. For a long moment, they simply lay entwined, their hearts hammering a frantic rhythm against each other, the echoes of their shared climax vibrating through every cell. Slowly, the intensity receded, replaced by a profound sense of peace and utter contentment. Her muscles still trembled, a delicious residual ache, and she could feel the dampness of their exertions on her skin, the scent of their passion filling the air. He shifted, pulling back just enough to look at her, his eyes dark and heavy-lidded, searching hers. A soft smile touched his lips, full of tenderness and a possessive warmth that made her heart ache in the best possible way. "Mine," he whispered, his voice husky with emotion, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, then her temple, then the corner of her mouth. "Always." She traced the strong line of his jaw with a trembling finger, her own smile blooming, radiant and unreserved. "And you, my love," she murmured, her voice equally thick with feeling, "entirely wonderfully mine." He chuckled softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her, and then, with a graceful strength, he rolled to his side, pulling her with him so that she was tucked against him, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm a secure weight around her waist. She felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, a comforting counterpoint to the fading echoes of their earlier frenzy. The silk sheets, now slightly rumpled, felt cool against her heated skin. A welcome contrast. "Are you all right?" he asked, his fingers gently stroking the soft skin of her arm, sending shivers through her. It was a simple question, yet laced with such care and concern that it melted any lingering tension she might have held. "More than all right," she sighed, nestling deeper into his embrace. "Perfect. Utterly perfect." She tilted her head to look up at him, her eyes still sparkling with the afterglow. "You have a way of making me forget everything but you." He leaned down, pressing another soft kiss to her hair. "The feeling is entirely mutual, my darling. When I'm with you, the world outside simply ceases to exist. There's only this. Only us." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle symphony of their breathing and the distant chirping of crickets. The moon cast a soft, ethereal glow through the large windows, painting silver streaks across the floor. The air, though warm, carried a faint, sweet scent of jasmine from the garden below, mingling with the intoxicating aroma of their shared intimacy. She thought of the journey that had brought them to this moment. The initial spark, the tentative glances, the unspoken yearning that had simmered between them for weeks, perhaps months. She remembered the first time he'd touched her, a fleeting brush of hands that had sent a jolt of electricity through her, igniting a hunger she hadn't known she possessed. The slow, tantalizing dance of their courtship, each shared laugh, each lingering look, building an undeniable connection that transcended mere attraction. "I still can't believe this is real," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming." He tightened his arm around her, pulling her impossibly closer. "If it's a dream, then let us never wake up," he murmured, his lips brushing the top of her head. "But I assure you, my love, this is very real. Every touch, every breath, every beat of my heart for you." His words were a balm to her soul, an anchor in the swirling sea of her emotions. She had known love before, or thought she had, but nothing had ever felt so profound, so all-consuming, so immeasurable. With him, there was no pretense, no hesitation, no fear. Only an open, vulnerable surrender to a connection that felt ancient and destined. "Do you remember," she began, a small smile playing on her lips, "that first time we truly talked? After the charity gala, you walked me home, and we stood by my door for what felt like hours, just talking about everything and nothing." He chuckled, a rich, warm sound. "How could I forget? I was captivated. Your wit, your passion, the way your eyes sparkled when you spoke about something you cared about. I knew then that I was in trouble." "Trouble?" she teased, nudging him playfully. "Glorious, beautiful trouble," he corrected, his voice laced with affection. "I'd never met anyone who challenged me, intrigued me, and charmed me all at once the way you did. I left your doorstep that night with my head spinning, already devising ways to see you again." She smiled, remembering the nervous flutter in her stomach, the anticipation that had kept her awake that night. "I felt the same. I spent the next day replaying every word, every glance. I think I knew, even then, that you were different. That this was different." He kissed her hair again. "We were both rather smitten, weren't we?" "Utterly," she agreed, a wave of warmth spreading through her. "And now, look at us." She gestured vaguely around the luxurious bedroom, the moonlit space that held the echoes of their passion. "It feels like we've crossed a threshold tonight. Like something truly profound has happened." "It has," he confirmed, his voice serious, yet tender. "We've opened ourselves to each other completely. There's no turning back now, is there?" "And I wouldn't want to," she confessed, looking up at him, her eyes wide and earnest. "I want to keep falling deeper and deeper with you. I want every part of you, and I want to give you every part of me." His gaze intensified, a raw, powerful emotion shining in his eyes. He leaned down, and this time his kiss was slow, deliberate, a promise and a question all at once. It was a kiss that spoke of devotion, of a future unfolding, of a love that was just beginning to reveal its boundless depths. His lips were soft, warm, exploring hers with a tender reverence that brought tears to her eyes. She responded with equal fervor, pouring all her love and longing into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, breathless once more, a profound understanding passed between them. The night was indeed a canvas, and they had only just begun to paint their story. A new desire, softer but no less potent, began to stir within her. It wasn't the urgent, demanding hunger of before, but a slow, delicious thrum, born of their shared vulnerability and the deepening connection between them. She felt his body respond in kind, a subtle hardening against her thigh, a quiet affirmation of his own rekindled yearning. She shifted slightly, her hand finding the warm skin of his chest, her fingers tracing the strong contours of his muscles. "I feel like I'm seeing you for the first time, even though I've known you for months," she whispered, her voice soft and wondering. Every curve, every line, every sensation, it's all new and exhilarating. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "And you, my love. There's a universe in your eyes tonight, a galaxy of passion and wonder. I want to explore every star." He moved slowly, deliberately, pulling back the silk sheet that had partially covered them. The moonlight now bathed them fully, illuminating their bodies with an almost ethereal glow. He looked at her, his gaze lingering on her breasts, her waist, the gentle curve of her hips, his eyes alight with admiration, and a quiet reverence that made her feel exquisitely beautiful. Then, with an unhurried grace, he began to kiss her shoulder, his lips warm and moist against her skin. He trailed soft, lingering kisses down her arm, over her collarbone, causing goosebumps to bloom in their wake. Her breath hitched in her throat as he reached the sensitive skin of her inner arm, his tongue flicking lightly, sending shivers directly to her core. "You are so exquisite," he murmured against her skin, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "Every inch of you is a masterpiece." He moved lower, his lips finding the soft swell of her breast, teasing the sensitive peak with gentle nips and soft sucking. A moan escaped her, low and involuntary, as pleasure surged through her, different from before. Slower, more drawn out, building with a luxurious languor. She arched her back, offering herself to his ministrations, her fingers tangling in his hair, holding him close. He shifted, rising slightly above her, his eyes still locked with hers, a silent question passing between them. She answered with a soft, encouraging smile, her heart pounding with a delicious anticipation. This time, there was no rush, no frantic need to reach the peak, only a desire to savor every touch, every breath, every exquisite sensation. He kissed her deeply then, a slow, passionate kiss that tasted of desire and devotion. His hand found her hip, stroking the curve of it, then moving lower, teasing the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. Her body was already humming, a symphony of awakened nerves, and she instinctively parted her legs, welcoming his touch. His fingers were gentle, yet firm, tracing patterns on her skin, exploring the soft folds, finding the source of her yearning. She gasped, her body arching into his touch, her hips rising slightly from the bed. He watched her, a smoldering intensity in his gaze, delighting in her reactions, drawing out her pleasure with an expert hand. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, as her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "So beautiful when you let go." She could feel herself opening to him, not just physically, but emotionally. All defenses down, all vulnerability embraced. This was love in its purest, most elemental form. A giving and receiving that transcended words. He moved above her, pressing his body against hers, the familiar heat of him a welcome sensation. This time, their connection was slower, more deliberate, each thrust a deeper affirmation of their bond. He looked into her eyes, his own filled with such profound adoration that it took her breath away. He moved within her with a sensual rhythm, drawing out her pleasure, building it steadily, exquisitely. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, wanting to feel every inch of him, wanting to be utterly consumed. Their bodies moved together as one, a dance of ancient passion and modern love, perfectly synchronized. Each slow, deep thrust was a revelation, an affirmation of their shared journey, their unfolding love story. The world outside the bedroom, the worries of the day, the demands of life, all faded into an indistinct hum. There was only the feel of his skin against hers, the scent of him, the taste of him on her lips, the rhythm of their bodies moving together, and the boundless, intoxicating ocean of emotion that enveloped them. She felt the familiar stirrings of her climax beginning to build again, a gentler, more profound ascent this time, fueled by a deeper emotional connection. It was a slow, delicious warmth that spread through her veins, gathering strength, pulling her towards another precipice. She closed her eyes, letting go, trusting him implicitly to guide her. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, seeing the pleasure bloom on her face, feeling her body tighten around him. He matched her pace, his movements becoming more urgent, more insistent, pulling her higher and higher until she cried out his name, her body arching in a final glorious release. This time, it was a soft, trembling explosion, a shower of golden sparks that left her feeling utterly sated, yet yearning for more of Wow. He held her close, burying his face in her hair, groaning with his own release, a deep guttural sound that spoke of pure, unadulterated pleasure and profound love. His body shuddered against hers, then went still, collapsing onto her with a comforting weight. They lay for a long time, entangled, breathless, their skin slick with sweat, their hearts slowly returning to a steady rhythm. The moonlight still streamed through the windows, now casting longer shadows as the night deepened towards dawn. "My love," he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion and emotion. "You are everything." She kissed his shoulder, her lips lingering on the warm skin. "And you, my heart. You have awakened something in me I didn't even know existed." He shifted, rolling them gently onto their sides, pulling the silk sheets up over their bodies. He tucked her head into the crook of his neck, his arm a secure band around her waist. She felt utterly safe, completely cherished, profoundly loved. The night was drawing to a close, the first faint hint of gray beginning to soften the edges of the dark sky outside. But the night they had shared, the journey they had taken together, felt like an eternity. It was a night of discovery, of passion, of surrender, and of a love that promised to be boundless. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart against her ear, feeling the warmth of his body pressed against hers. All the anxieties of the world seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of peace and belonging. She was utterly, irrevocably his, and he entirely, wonderfully hers. The night had indeed been a canvas, and they had painted a masterpiece. And as sleep began to claim her, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that their love story had only just begun. She drifted into a soft, dreamless slumber, a contented smile gracing her lips, anticipating the warmth of his embrace when she woke with the morning sun.